we, us, how and why did we get here? This is the thing that is a subject of great curiosity, to say the least. Well, let's take a typical one, but not the most important one. Here, we are moving along here, and boing, we hit that part of that radiation, and we smell it, taste it. What's that? So we move in a little level over here to another, and we get another taste of it. You say, you know, that's real interesting. I wonder what that is and what that's like. So you're trying to figure a way where you can move in here, because it's getting pretty strong stuff and sticky and this kind of thing. So you're very cautious, and at that particular moment, as you're contemplating, you're perceiving all this in here with great curiosity. All of a sudden, this big man, that's a misnomer, a he-she, that's more like it, appeared. It's, what do you want? And you say, oh, well, what's that down there? He says, that's humans. And you say, well, can I go closer? And he says, well, not unless you be human. He says, well, I'll be human. He says, you what? He says, well, I'd like to be human. And he says, well, I suppose you could if you really wanted to. And you say, well, how do I do it? He says, well, just call me Ed, incidentally. I'm the entry director, and just so you can call me Ed for short. You say, oh, yes, Ed. Okay. He says, the first thing you have to do in order to be human, you say, oh, don't misunderstand. I just want to get a taste, a sample, and zoom in and zoom out. That's all. I don't want to stay there. Oh, no, I wouldn't think of staying there. That's just a taste. You know, just a little sip. And Ed looks at you and says, yes, yes, I understand. So what you do in that process, he says, the first thing that you need to do in order to be human is recognize that time-space exists. You say, well, somehow I perceive it. There it is. He says, well, what you perceive is only part of it. There's a lot more to it than that. He says, well, I'll take my chances. He says, well, the other part is that you have to recognize that when you become human, that you have an important thing you must do in order to be human. You say, well, what's that? He says, well, you have to have shut off all of your present memory and your present self. Otherwise, you can't generate this human consciousness. You say, oh, sure, I can pick it up when I get out. And he says, yeah. And he says, the other thing is that you are really on your own, because that's what that is down there, is that people are on their own. Those who come in and become human make supposedly their own decisions. You say, oh, I'll make my own decisions. He says, yeah. So he says, now, if you really want, we can set it up. You say, oh, sure, I got to go. He says, all right, first thing you got to do is, what do you want? Do you want to be male or female? And you look and say, what's that? He says, never mind. He says, can I select for you? Oh, yeah, you tell me which way. All right, fine. He says, the next thing is that you have to make a decision of where you want your entry point is. And he says, that's a decision that you have to make, because there are kind of problems. He says, for example, on Park Avenue in New York, there's a wait list line, a long wait list line to get there. Marin County, California, long line, that kind of stuff. And he says, Beverly Hills, almost impossible. But he says, we've got plenty of fast takers, say, in Africa, instant service. You can get in right away. South America, the same thing. Easy, no problem. And he says, and I can just really rig it. And you say, well, that first one, it sounds pretty interesting, but you say it's waitlisted. He says, yeah, Park Avenue, forget it, but in New York. He says, and you say, but if it's New York, and it's close to that wait listing, isn't there any place in New York I can get in? And he thinks this is, yes, I can get you in, as a matter of fact, pretty quickly. Just right now, just wait and see. You see, that's fine, you're right. He says, all right, you got to be careful now. Remember, you're on your own. He says, oh, I can make it. so he says, okay, you agreed, sign the contract. He says, okay, fine. Click, I sign. So he takes you, and he goes, Koong! And you go, bang. And at that bang, you look very closely, if one were there, and they would see a little newborn baby squalling and screaming, not hearing the screams to let me out of here, but just a screaming baby, newly born, lying in the broken glass, the garbage, and the dust and the dirt on the landing of a fifth-floor walk-up in the Bronx, while the 13-year-old mother, having just given birth, is hurrying down the stairs to get away. And so one begins life here. The thing that happens after that is where the action really starts. You go through that life process, and the symbology can have been 100,000 years ago. The whole symbology is still the same. And you make your exit, and you start out again. Now, originally, your intent was to take your escape velocity and go on out and continue wherever you were intending to go or whatever you intended to do. But right about here somewhere, you begin to bend a little bit. The reason is that as you made this process through here in what we call physical life, you picked up a greater load factor than you realized. Unconsciously, you picked up that load factor. And you had friction, which slowed you up. The combination of those two is expressed in the bending of that, where you, no one else, no law, nothing else, makes the decision when you said, how many times, I got to go back. There's just something I wanted to do, and I didn't get a chance to do it. I wanted to have 5 children instead of 2, and I got to go back and have 3 more children, or some such thing. Or I never got to drink alcohol. I'd like to go back and drink some booze. Whatever the reason. And you say, oh, just say to yourself, just once, that's all, and then I'll go on my way. And so you begin that turn to make just once more, one little more run, just one more for the road or whatever. And at that moment, that decision, which was yours and no one else's, no law, no rule, just you lost your escape velocity. And you went into orbit in this area. And you went down and around again. Had another life. And as you came out of that, you still were, as in essence, above this line. So you were recognized still from whence you came. You came up around in here, and you made another decision. Having lost more velocity, having picked up an additional load factor, you're here. And you say, oh, it won't hurt to go back once more. And I've always wanted to ride a camel. So you decide to go back and ride and own a camel. So round you go again and go through the process here. And again, you are steadily losing velocity, and your orbit is decaying, as you can see. Once you get below this line of demarcation, as it were, you're thinking more about here than you are about there. Your memory of you as you originally were is declining because of the overwhelming input from this human radiation. So down you go again for another life, another one, another one, another one, until you get to this point where you're locked in, and you have little, even in between life sojourns, you have little, if any, perception of this radiation from whence you came. There's a word for that, which I probably have already used, that fits it very, very accurately. And that word is word all have become human junkies. We're addicted to being human and the human experience. Most importantly, what the real, I'll put it in our modern jargon, the most attractive advertising for this being human, bar none, and which attracts most, if the highest percentage and the majority of those who come to be human, is to meet a graduate of this particular compressed learning school. A graduate of the being human experience is, I have to be unequivocal about it, is a God in other energy systems. And you have to think of it that way. Is a God in, as we term God, put it that way. And remember, our concepts of God from one perspective is very much local traffic type of perception. But there it is that's once you meet a graduate of this particular system, truly a graduate, then in turn you, and probably have, said to yourself, I will do anything 1,000 times, 100,000 times, whatever, if I can be like that graduate. And that's exactly the important thing. Because a graduate is much on the order of what we perceive to be a super something. And the availability of that being and where those graduates go and be is something that we will not get into tonight, but it becomes obvious that they are no longer interested in local traffic. So I can just hear the radiation of all of you as you're saying, well, what about us? Where are we? Are we locked in? Wrong. You are those, and I can give you a number of different descriptions, and you can figure out the acronym when I say you're the SAers, S.A.ers, who have begun the recycling, where you in turn have begun to work yourself out more and more. In other words, you're on your way out. You have begun to achieve a deeper and deeper orbit. That's who you are. Step by step, laboriously, lifetime after lifetime, you have begun to accumulate or re-establish escape velocity. My best guess, and it's only a guess because it's so hard to measure, that most gateway graduates are up in here sometime. In other words, they are on the verge not of achieving escape velocity, but way up here on what I call the last timer role. I see you as those who, when they make their exit from this sojourn, this time, will get into this last sojourn spot of contemplation or thinking about what will be my last run in. You are a last timer to be. So what that role is that you will play for the last time is something that you will decide, not now, but where you are in this contemplative, non-physical state. And I might add that some have stayed there for thousands of years. And I say that in a very funny way because that is out of time, but by our concept, they would have stayed there for thousands of years. And you have some very, very fascinating options, knowing that our recorded history is this limited, when the span of human history is about 10 to 20 times that long at least. So that gives you an idea of what your options are, and your options don't become limited to the future. They're all up and down that span of human existence. Fascinating? Great opportunities. Think what fun you can have, you know? So, that is where you are, how you are, and why you are. And it, again, has something of extreme interest. And what I need to do then is show you why some of those things are in that way and how that relates to you. And this is interesting in that it will help you begin to perceive you as you really are. You're in 21, and this is the opportunity for you to play. We all like the tendency to move outward and perceive externals. One of the key things today, tonight, that I think you can do is know yourself first. Because that's what I had to do in going back and looking under the hood, as it were, of what I am. Now, I can tell you what I found. I found, first of all, instead of in 21 enrolling this way, and put it in, it's a crude way, but it's the best I can do. I rolled this way, inside, and moved inward. And it took weeks and months to get this piece by piece knowledge, information, or whatever. But what I began to find, first of all, was a catalog being continually updated on every possible part of me, of my experience, my emotions, my activities, whatever. It was a memory bank, if you want to put it that way, a life history recording of me. And you could go up and down that whole life history. Another way of putting it is it is as if we are all operating a computer workstation here, if you can think of it that way. And that's a mainframe. And you're feeding the mainframe with all this data. And you're offloading it over here into what might be called short-term memory, whatever. But that's all the permanent feed up there. And it's all, anything that you know or think you are or hide from is all there. It's all open. But it's you look at it, it's so clean and so beautifully organized that it's fun to get to know the real parts of you by hitting that mainframe that is a part of that whole thing of you. This is all you. This is the points. Not anywhere else, not in some wild universe. This is you. Moving inward to that, another layer, which is a busy place, as it were, and I watched with great amusement that it is an emotional layer. And this is a layer of all the emotions you're constantly accumulating, and there's a mechanism that's shoveling them off somewhere, like this, joink, joink, joink. It's like a conveyor belt that's throwing it out this way while your life is dumping it in here. It's very interesting. And I found out later, of course, that's the way it looks, but it's actually sorting it out and classifying the different types of emotion. So then moving, and it took a long time to get past these fascinating things. And then there is this intellectual level, layer, and getting into that, and that was a lot of familiar things, but there again, it was knowledge that I had no knowledge I had that information, which is fascinating. And totally, and I spent weeks and months in there. It's, again, like a system of cataloging. Here was and I looked at it, and different people look at it in different ways, but I looked at it as a huge, huge carpet of flowers, is the best way I can put it. But each flower was a life experience, a life personality. And I looked at these thousands of flowers and said, come on, wait a minute, I've been all of these? And over here is a laugh, chuckle, and says, sure, kid, sure, what'd you expect, you know? And here's this mass of different textured, radiating, vibrant things, and this this pattern of, it's how to describe it, it's indescribable, except it's like a huge family feel, like brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles. It has that kind of feel, only much closer. And there's this total intercommunication with all these in the sense that they know you, and as you begin to work and go touch one of the flowers, which you soon find out is a face, hi boy, and the joy that you have finally recognized this. And that was reflected in, I look and I say, so this is what it's all about. This is what I am. All of these life personalities, all of these lifetime experiences. And I then said, and that's what it is. And I finally have made that understanding, that brilliant thing. And this voiceover says, well, it took you long enough. And then I found out much more about what I now call the I there of me. And take the hyphen out, and it becomes the it of me. And the it of which I am, and it is I, is indeed composed of literally, and nobody really bothers to count it in my it cluster, how many lives we have lived. But it's somewhere above 2,000, and that I figure is enough. And nobody bothers. Says, go find out for yourself. And I don't want to go over there and count all these different things. Nobody does, so we don't know. But as the need arises, and there is sort of an executive committee, as it were, how these are I have no idea. I am whatever. That selects a number of life personalities to form a new one, and to send down for or insert into an earth life sojourn. And mine was selected for a very specific, from specific life experiences, to live in the century of the fire wagons. In other words, the 20th century, when we were using explosions to do things with instead of the other means of doing things, to live that 20th century. And I got to know them. I suspected something like this, but didn't understand it. And these are the clusters that are sent in my case, and this is the thing. You all go find this out for yourself. This is available to you. All this mass of historical experience. You now are in the position popping into 21 and go to 21 and turn left, and there it is. And that is not only your own life experience, but all of this mass of, present life experience, but all this mass of others. I assure you, there's nothing that you can think or be, or feel, or be emotional about that you haven't experienced at least 50 to 100 times before. And you go through the catalog and say, well, fine, I've lost my love. My lover, and you go down through here and you'll find all these ones. Well, I did this here, oh, this is pretty good, I'll use that. You see, it's like a catalog of yourself, and it's your own personal catalog. My earliest life experience was, at least that I can find, and it isn't, there may be another one, is 150,000 years ago, if I can measure it by our time. See, our recorded history is a little small segment, and that's the thing you've become so fascinated with. How could human history be that small when there's so much of it? And it's all there. You can go play in it. And I can tell you that it's probably the most important fun you can have in your life, because it's also so very useful. My it is continuously busy, as all other its are, is retrieving parts of life personalities that have been lost for one reason or another. So you see, that was the design. They got lost. They're lost in the BS territories, and they're supposed to come back to the it. You see that? To your it. Nobody else's but yours. The I there of you. And what happens is that your it and my it, everyone's, are constantly cruising these BS territories to retrieve life personalities of each of us that has gotten lost or locked into one of these territories, and they're retrieving them and bringing them back to the id. You know why? That's what they're all doing, and this is what you're doing. And you find out again. I'm being so dogmatic, go find out. And what it is, your id is doing is collecting all of these so that you, in turn, can take off and wink out. And that's how I found out about that, because I began to discover, and you'll discover it, that your id has adjoining its all bonded to it. You are a part of a bonding system that I'm 86% sure that you all are within this bonded cluster of its, of which I am a part. And what we're doing is that we are gathering all of the parts of us together, each individual. Like you got some that are lost in various belief systems, and there's a constant flow of retrieving those and getting them stuck back in. They're parts of you. That, I can give you a classic one that you know about already, having gone this far in Gateway, is that Miranon is attempting to retrieve Shay, who is here. And that's his connection, is he's a retriever trying to pull Shay back into their id cluster so that they can move on and wink out and go in another direction. And we'll get to that tomorrow night. So have a good time in 21.